Did we get this whole slide done? Okay.
I feel like we didn't talk about Pennsylvania prosperity.
I think possibly the bell rang right at the end, or not? I'm gonna pick another class.
Did we talk about Pennsylvania prosperity?
Okay, basically, just to sum up the slide, William Penn became a Quaker, and you read about this, so you've read more detail than I'm giving you here. He became a Quaker, and he's basically looking for a safe haven for Quakers, a place for religious freedom. The king owed him land, owed his father money, and he said, hey, after his father passed, rather than give me money, just give me some land in the New World. The king did that, and so he started Penn's Woods, a place with religious freedom. He then advertised it, promoted it throughout Europe, sent flyers, letters, and it becomes really one of the most productive, profitable colonies, grows the fastest out of all the colonies, and so Pennsylvania prospers because that Philadelphia soon becomes the second largest city in the colonies. So that's Pennsylvania. Okay, Georgia, another proprietary colony. This time, we have a unique founding in that we have another man that it's given to, whose name is James Oglethorpe. We'll get his name up here for you. But Oglethorpe is unusual in that he was a Christian man who saw a problem in England that he wanted to fix. I have on here NPO. Anybody know what that stands for?
No.
Probably it's not a concept. A non-profit organization. Okay? So, non-profit organization is created basically, it's a company not to make a profit, but to benefit society. And that's what he saw with Georgia. So in England, they had this system in which if you borrowed money and couldn't pay it back, you were put in prison. It's called debtor's prison. So, what's the problem with that?
People, they never get their money.
Okay. If you owe money and you don't pay it back, they put you in prison until you pay it back.
Can't make money.
You can't make money in prison, right? So it's a bad system. The hope was, hey, your family members will pay it for you to get you out of prison. Ultimately, England ended up with these overflowing prisons with men that they weren't criminals, they just owed money and hadn't paid it back. So they hadn't done like harsh crimes. And so Oglethorpe saw that and saw an opportunity to really kind of help the system by going to the king and saying, why don't you let me take these debtors and they can pay off their debt by going to the New World and helping start a colony. And so in his mind, he was doing it to basically help those that are in prison. Again, a Christian man seeing that we're called to visit people in prison, help people in prison, and that's what he's doing with Georgia. So the king gets presented this by Oglethorpe, and the king thinks this is a pretty good idea, it could take care of my debtor's prison. Even more so, the king looks at Georgia down here, and in the south is Florida, and Florida is controlled by the Spanish, and the Spanish and the English do not like each other at all, and so he sees it as not only will it get debtors out of my country, it will give me kind of a buffer zone. So if the Spanish attack, who will they kill first? The prisoners, okay? So the king's like, good. So that way they'll have to work their way through people that I don't value very much in the prisoners, and before they get up to the Carolinas. So it's a win-win for the king. Oglethorpe gets this opportunity to start it, and the king's name was King George. You don't have to know that for the test, but that's how Georgia gets founded. So that's probably the most unusual of the 13 colonies. Basically, Oglethorpe trying to help fix a wrong in society, and the king wanting a buffer zone between him and the Spanish. Okay, final slide, and we're done. We've talked about most of the colonies up here, Massachusetts and the Puritans, Rhode Island, the Separatists. We just talked about Georgia, the Carolinas, very kind of elitist, these noblemen that get there. Virginia, one of the first colonies, most prosperous colonies. Talk about Pennsylvania and religious freedom, Maryland and the Roman Catholics. Delaware and New Jersey will come later, so we didn't talk about them too much, or New Hampshire. Last one we're going to talk about is New York. And basically, what I want you to know about New York is it began as a colony for the Dutch. So when we looked at the map over here, we talked about, the eastern seaboard is basically the English. That was true except for New Netherlands. The Netherlands, the Dutch, again confusing, they call themselves the Dutch, but the country's name is Netherlands. They had earlier come in and found this cool island called Manhattan, and bought it from the Indians for about $2,400. pretty good deal. It's worth a little bit more than that today. And they created a fort, Fort Orange, and a city, New Amsterdam. So just like we have New England and New Spain, these different places, the Dutch do the same thing, and they create this colony with the capital of New Amsterdam called New Netherland. The English, however, I mean, it is right in the middle of all their colonies here, and the Dutch aren't an overly strong country, so the king sends over his brother, the Duke of York. The English king sends the Duke of York. He sails into New York. I'm sorry, New Netherlands at that time, with massive warships. And basically, the Dutch look at him and say, "Tell you what, we'll just give you the colony if you let us stay." And the Duke of York thinks that's a great idea, so he lets them stay. He takes it over. He renames it New York, and that's how we get New York Colony. So originally Dutch, taken over by the English in basically a, violent, free battle in which they just surrendered to the English. And so with that, we'll have basically English colonies from Georgia to Maine, all controlled by the country of England. Okay? Questions? Good. So that's it for our lecture. That's the end. So let me tell you what we're going to do the rest of the class.